Welcome to Level Agency's Test, Learn, Grow podcast. My name is Dave Babst. I'm the Vice President of Agency Development and Strategic Partnerships. And on this episode, I am really excited to welcome a very respected entrepreneur in the Pittsburgh community and a good friend of mine, John Meyer, to the program here. John is the CEO and founder of CompleteU. And has lived, I think, a really interesting professional life here in Pittsburgh. And we're going to get into some of that throughout the course of this episode. So, John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dave. I'm excited. Thanks for having me on. Always fun talking higher education and what are some of the ways and means that students can find success through degree completion. So I'm excited to have some time with you. Thanks for having me.
I am too. But before we get into any of that, John, I just want to talk a little bit about you, man. Would love for you just to share with our audience a little bit about your personal journey from college to where you are today, and then talk to us a little bit about what you're doing with CompleteU as well.
Yeah, sure. So I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. I like a lot of Pittsburghers, you find your way back home, and I've been able to do that. I went to Allegheny College, which is a small private liberal arts school just north of Pittsburgh, about an hour and a half away. I went there initially to obviously get an education, play football and baseball. And then it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I had shoulder surgery, and that was the end of both of those pipe dreams, which even at a Division III school were very thin to begin with. And it really made me think about what is it that I want to do with my future? And that's made me want to get into broadcasting. To be truthful, the problem was Allegheny didn't offer any broadcasting classes. So I still found a way to meander my way into Shadow Day at WTAE, which is the ABC affiliate here in Pittsburgh. And then that led into an internship, which led into a broadcasting career. My first job in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, then Erie, Pennsylvania, then Elmira, New York, CBS in Des Moines, Iowa for 4 years, and then back here at ABC where I interned at WTAE, which is, again, a Hearst station. So I did that for 4 years and met my wife, where we were co-anchors on the morning show here at Channel 4 in Pittsburgh. And after 4 years, I said, you know what, you're a lot more talented at this than I am. Why don't you stay in it? I had a lot of fun doing it. I mean, who doesn't want to cover sports in their 20s? And got to do so many incredible things. The people I got to interview and meet, and the experiences at 20 years old, you're traveling around the country covering the best sporting events that the U.S. can offer. So I got out of it 10 years ago, out of broadcasting. So I spent a decade in it, got out of it 10 years ago, and started with a startup in Wexford, Pennsylvania, just north of Pittsburgh, and left there after, just shy of 2 years. And then went to a local higher education software and services provider called ECSI, spent almost 8 years there, and then started CompleteU.
It's such an awesome journey. And I think you and I share a number of things in common. A love of sport, and also the gift that we outpunted our coverage as it relates to our spouse. Mine started out in banking, as did I, and I realized she was far more talented in that field, and I kind of moved into some different areas from there. I'm fascinated by your journey, though, in that you started out as a broadcaster, and then you made your way into business and into sales. Talk to me just as a salesperson, talk to me about that transition and how you were able to actually make that transition from what is probably an unconventional path by any stretch, right?
Well, the foundation of some of my, I'll call it entrepreneurship, selling, and wanting to try new things started in college. I actually started a fraternity, of all things, with my friends, and I met with a couple of local business guys. One happens to be a local college president now, and Chris Brusalis, who's now the president at Point Park University. And they said, would you like to bring back our fraternity? I said, great. Where's the house? And this was at Allegheny College. And they said, funny story, we don't have one anymore. We sold it. And they said, oh, okay. I said, is there any money left over? No, we had some loans. We paid this. Okay. And so are there any members left on campus? No. I said, you want me to sell a fraternity on a small private liberal arts education school with no house, no money, and no members? And so we did. And we became the largest fraternity on campus within 6 months. And we had the highest GPA, which we were really proud of. And we had a bunch of proud alums. And one of those alums, Lloyd Segan, who was owns his own production company in LA, offered me a paid internship to his company in LA for the summer going into my senior year. And I turned it down because I wanted to get into broadcasting. I only had 1 summer left of internships. And I didn't even have the internship at WTA yet in Pittsburgh. I just knew I wanted to get into it. So talk about like betting on you, right? Like, and he just looked at me and goes, I don't know that that's the smartest move, but I'll help you. And he did. So he helped me get an internship with this traveling, kind of like Amazing Race. It was an event that was a scavenger hunt in different cities every week. Yeah. And he said, we're thinking about putting this on television. Why don't you go and help them set up and learn what it's like to be, again, part of a small startup? Right. And so I did. And because I had that internship Thursday through Sunday, when I shadowed at Channel 4 in Pittsburgh, I said, my guess is you don't have anything available for a guy with no broadcasting background. I said, you're right. Well, and so I said, I'm willing to work 7 days a week. Can I work here Monday to Wednesday? And then I got to get on an airplane and go to a new city every week and come back Sunday night. And then I'll be here Monday morning. So I just worked 7 days a week that whole summer. And that's what helped me get into broadcasting. And I always say, the reason I got into broadcast is because I started a fraternity. But it was my first foray into, great, we started this thing. You know, first thing is we got to raise some dues, which is known as raising money, right? We didn't have to raise any money in CompleteU. We don't have any investors, but that was my first idea. We need some seed capital, right? And then we grew it, and I'm still involved with it today. I'm on a foundation that we actually give Allegheny students and FIDELs from Allegheny 6 scholarships each year. And it's a real passion of mine. And Lloyd and I are now 20 some years later still connected in that foundation with a couple of our other fraternity brothers from his classes. So that, though, is what gave me the confidence to go, why would you want to step foot into a TV studio when you have no background? That's pretty scary. And I did. And I screwed it up pretty good. Like all the stumbles and the stutters, I had all of that. But what I realized is it was teaching me it's okay to fail and you're going to screw up, but just keep forging ahead. And that led into my broadcasting career. And I was in the middle of my broadcasting career when I told my wife, you stay in it and I'll get out, and started. I remember sitting in my office when I first started with this company called Tower Metrics. And I'm like, what did I just do? I just left a solid career. And that first couple of weeks is hard, but then you get through it. And starting CompleteU was the same. That was a little bit easier, I would say. It wasn't easy, but easier because I knew higher education. I had spent 8 years in it. I had some contacts, and I just found this niche that I said, I think that there's a place for our company to help students in this kind of way with an old school kind of approach to it. Yeah. And that's turning out to be true.
So I always love to ask entrepreneurs this question, and having gotten to know you over the past 6-7 years, the 2 things that really stood out to me from the go were that you have just a natural presence and an ability to tell stories. I can see where that would kind of extend across broadcasting and sales. And then you just had this, even before you started a company, you had an undeniable passion for entrepreneurship. And it was of no shock to me that a couple of years ago, you started your own thing. And even I think at one point in time reached out to me and said, hey, I'm thinking about this. I left that conversation thinking this is going to happen. Right. But talk to me about what led to you starting CompleteU and some of the problems that you think you're solving in a unique way in higher education today.
Yeah. So when I got to ECSI, they were known as the country's largest campus-based loan servicer. So they were the largest Perkins loan servicer. They had the Department of Education contract, which since 2018, there's no new Perkins loans that have been dispersed. So it's a runoff of the portfolio. And ECSI as a company had to pivot. And so the company started this product that would prevent students from going to collections who owe cash balances. So if my tuition for the term was $10,000 and my student loans cover $9,000, I have to write the school $1,000 check, or else I'm not allowed to come back for the next semester. And there were a lot of students like that, right? And Perkins loans would cover that gap, Dave. And so as they went away, there already was a gap in a number of students that owed, let's call it $1,000, $2,000. But now that gap's only going to grow, and the number of students with that gap is only going to grow because Perkins isn't there anymore to cover that gap. It was the last loan that many students would use to cover the remaining piece of their tuition. And so I got really excited. One, I started with the company, and the owner, or the previous owner, John Lynch, had already sold the business to Heartland Payment System, then was taken over by Global Payments. And naturally, there was some strong motivation. He said, I want this to really work. You need to be all in on this product and help us grow it. And I was. And it was really fun to be a part of that startup product, even within a larger, more established company that he had built, a really great company. And that was built on service. And it went really well. Well, after 5, 6, 7 years, I noticed, I'm like, man, all these schools are sending us thousands of accounts. There's no way that all of these students, A, the balance is so large, it's not worth a discussion about a negotiation. B, that they're not in good academic standing. And C, that they're not so close to completion that you couldn't figure all those three things out, right? And help the student finish. So somewhere, my point is, we sorted a spreadsheet and said, there has to be some low-hanging fruit. What's the least that we could do with this population? If you didn't just reach out to them and say, hey, we want to remind you to pay your balance, what if you got them to the table and said, hey, we'd like you to also re-enroll? And this is beyond that work. I said, all right, well, that's students with a balance. What about all stop-out students? So I started doing some research. I said, there's 40 million students like this in the United States. I mean, I think that's like 17% of the adult population. And don't quote me on that. I believe I posted something, but I want to say it's like 17% of the adult population has some college and no degree. Think about that. 17%. That includes everybody that you can go to, like the overall population.
So the term stop out, I know is a term of art to a certain degree in higher ed. For those that are not as immersed in it as you and I are, how would you describe that?
So it depends on who you're talking to, but the short of it is, if I were to summarize it's what we would traditionally in the past call a dropout. Like somebody that went to college, took classes, have some credits, and have no degree. They didn't finish. Non-completers, some college, no degree, SCNDs, stop outs. It's all a way of saying these are students who have left the institution before finishing. And there's 40 million Americans like that. So I looked at the marketplace of other companies that were doing this, and I said, what if we really simplify? And this is where my background in higher ed really helped. I said, what if we could just create an old school call center model where we reach out to these students and schedule meetings and really hold their hand? There's a million pieces of software, and a million, I'm exaggerating, but there's plenty of software out there that can send a text, an email, do all these electronic things. But if electronic was working, then we wouldn't have 40 million Americans with some college no degree or stop-outs, right? So what if we could create a model where we reach out to them? And I knew it'd be a more expensive model, right? Because quote unquote, as I've been told many times, you can't scale a call center. Well, I disagree. We're showing that you can. And in this environment where enrollments are really hard right now to come by, right? And the looming enrollment cliff coming in 2025, in 2 years, high engagement and high touch is everything. And the only way to do that is human to human interaction. And the only way to do that, I know, is over the phone, unless we show up to somebody's doorstep, which I don't suggest in this day and age, because you may not get the response you want if you just start knocking on doors like you're Ed McMahon. So that's why we wanted to create the model that we did. So I said, what if we could reach out to all college stop-outs and bring them back to the school? And that led us to our first few clients like Canisius College, Long Island University. These people I've known in higher education for a long time, and they were willing to take a chance on John Meyer and CompleteU, and we're grateful for that. And that, about this time last year, we had 7 clients, and now we're at 40 on our way to 50 by the end of the year.
That's awesome. I love hearing stories like this.
Yeah.
So you started out by solving a pretty specific problem that is sizable, right? How have things evolved from there for you with CompleteU, and how are you differentiating in the market today?
Yeah. So a lot of, again, these companies, these larger companies, and rightfully so, as you know, you've been in the higher education space for a while. There is a place for software, and there is a place for AI, and there has to be, or else you're going to find your way on the outside looking in. What I'm saying is, and there are large companies investing in that. We are now looking at AI chat and how we're delivering some of our mechanisms. What I will say though, is going back to that human touch of, there is a place for us. There is a place for a call center and the relationships that we're looking for. And it comes back to trust. Can the school, through us, through CompleteU, create trust with that student? So I get asked all the time, well, students this age, this day and age, they don't pick up the phone. I said, you're right. Not the first time. But what we have found is when you leave a voicemail and you send a text and you send an email, CompleteU on behalf of Long Island University, on University of Akron, on Canisius, go down the line, University of Pittsburgh. When you do all that, trust is built, and we get a return phone call, or they pick up the second phone call, or they pick up the third. And then they realize, okay, yes, you're legit. I do want to come back. And our goal is, who's reaching out to these students that only have 1 or 2 semesters left or less, right? They might only have 6 credits to completion, 12. They may know, not majority of the students actually we reach out to don't even have AR balances, cash balances, even though that's originally the idea of what I started the company with, of could we solve the problem. We quickly moved into the way I realized most schools don't want to reach out to students with balances. They just want to reach out to stop out students with no balance, right? They want to leave that to the collection agencies. And we're working through some partnerships right now to solve that problem. But so the short of it is, we have evolved in a number of areas. So it started with stop out students, and then our own clients like Virginia Wesleyan and Unity Environmental University and some others said, wait a second, you have this capacity. Can you help us with new student recruitment? Yeah, absolutely. Give us the list and we'll work with it, right? And then that led to, well, do you guys have any way of working with adult learners for new student recruitment? So for those that aren't aware of the way higher education works, is the way your traditional high school student gets recruited is when they take the SAT or the PSAT, and by putting their address and phone number and all those other pieces of information down, that goes on a list, and that list gets sold to certain institutions, and then they market to you, right? And they look at your SAT score and your grades and things like that. There is no such thing for adult learners. If I'm a student that's an adult or a prospective adult learner, I didn't take the SAT. So how do you find me? So that's why we partnered with College App to solve that problem. Like, how can we help? We're the middleman here. How do we help our institutions go find these people? And College App, which stands for Adult Prospect Pipeline, and their CEO, Jack McKenzie, and I have become really close, and we've built a partnership. And what they are doing is incredible. They've quickly grown in 4 years, 200 schools, and half of those being community colleges. So this idea of, and I say idea because they're executing on the idea of access and equity and diversity, is they are checking every one of those boxes by making sure that everybody has that access. And so we partner with them of saying, hey, here's the data to our partner institutions. Now let us do the chasing. We will reach out to these students and prospective adult learners and say, do you want to go to ABC institution? And we will schedule that meeting, hold their hand all the way through that process, and then let their team do what they were really hired to do, which is package the student, the dance between financial aid, student accounts, and admissions. So I know I went a little haywire there and off topic.
I don't think so, but I mean, if I were to summarize, here's what I heard. You started CompleteU to solve a specific problem that was sizable with stop outs. In solving that problem and doing it effectively, your customers started to think about other applications of what it is that you offer and how you could help with enrollment, the enrollment of 18 to 22-year-olds. Right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
many of the schools that you serve today are recognizing that the demographics are not in their favor. And the enrollment cliff that you alluded to earlier in our conversation, that is going to be acutely hitting many areas of the United States over the course of the next 4 to 5 years, is such that the 18 to 22-year-old market is not one that is going to enable a lot of schools to be hugely successful. And so they're trying to think about how they can serve different audiences through education. And one of the largest audiences that has not historically been tapped all that broadly by the not-for-profit college and university world is the adult learner.
That's exactly right. And this is the growing market. And what are you doing as an institution? What are institutions doing out there to be flexible enough to deliver on education to adult learners? Because these are people over the age of 23, 24, 25 years old. The typical average age of an adult learner on our database is somewhere around 28, 29 years old. Mm-hmm. And so you have to provide flexibility to that group. If I already have a job and I may even be married with kids, I can only take 1 or 2 classes at a time. I can't drive 30 minutes through downtown traffic, 50 minutes an hour to go physically sit in a seat. So what kind of online modality are you providing to provide me that flexibility? That is the key of this population. And those schools, and they're already doing it, understand that, right? And they are moving. So Virginia Wesleyan is a great example. They have tripled enrollment from a small, private school in Virginia Beach to tripling enrollment to almost 4,500 students now, because they understand the importance of that flexibility for this population. Cambridge College in Boston is doing the exact same thing in multiple locations of saying, hey, we want to help this population, right? How do we move our instruction and be more flexible? Point Park University in Pittsburgh is doing it, and I could go down the line. These are small private schools that 10 years ago looked like every other small private school. And now they're really becoming the equity inclusive groups that are saying we can provide a fair tuition price for a really good degree with a great brand.
That's awesome. And in serving schools that are now more deeply engaging with adult learners, what are some of the surprising insights or trends that you and your team are uncovering?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the biggest thing is you have to have some of these students, especially on the stop outside, that have credits, right? That have some college no degree. You have to build some flexibility into the admissions process. Mm-hmm. The number of schools that we engage with that say, we love what you guys are doing and everything you stand for, CompleteU, but we have to get some things in line on our end because we're a little too rigid on the re-enrollment process, right? And I always say, don't let perfection become the enemy of good. That came from an old boss's boss of mine named Ron Farmer at Heartland. But I stole that from him, but it has always stuck with me, and it's true. Let's get the outreach out the door. But having said that, the first question I ask is, do you guys at least have some processes in place? Because if you have none, what ends up happening is we scale all these meetings for your team, right? And the success isn't there, and you kind of frustrate the student. So we don't want that to happen either, right? But if you are willing to be, I always use this word, and I know it's a little bit of a cliche these days, but if you're willing to be empathetic, you listen and sit on the phone a little bit longer. This is not traditional students are, I don't want to call it easy to enroll, but it's kind of plug and play, right? This group, you have to look and go, well, do these credits transfer? How do they transfer? Things like that. I'll give you a success story, Dave. We have a client in Michigan, and we had a student that we reached out to, and this isn't uncommon, that the student on paper, the stop out student, did not finish their degree. But when we looked through it and they looked through it, we looked at the portfolio and how many credit, we said, how could they not be done. They have like 130 credits completed.
Yeah.
120 usually is the line of demarcation, depending on where you are, which school. 100, about 120. And I said, how are they not done? And so the school looked into it, and I give them so much credit. They took the time to get the dean of one department and the dean of another department because they had enough credits in both. And they said, you know what? If we combine their credits taken in each one, that's a full degree. That this student is already, they don't even have to come back. Wow. They said, this is if we, how like certain schools create your own major, this is an example. And they said, no. They called the student up, and the student was almost in tears going, I'm done. They said, yeah, you're all done. You don't have to take a single class. That is what high touch, high engagement, just by reaching out, that's what that does, right? And that is not something you would have ever gotten in a text or an email or an electronic outreach. You have to bring people together.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question a little more succinctly, it's just, I think it's flexibility, it's empathy. The easy answer, Dave, as far as like, well, the reason students stop out is finances. It's not. Our data shows that yes, if it's a four-year private institution, about half of the students are going to say, because we survey every student over the phone or electronically, half of them are going to say in a four-year private finances. Yeah, we understand tuition's a little bit more there. Sure, more than a little bit. But on the four-year public side, on the community college side, 12% or less of students say finances is the reason. Wow. Right? And 7% say COVID. So here we are, 3 years removed from the start, 3.5 years removed from the start of COVID. COVID isn't the biggest reason, and finances isn't the biggest reason. What are the other reasons? Which is why, we have evolved as a company. We do new student recruitment, current student retention, stop out student re-enrollment. The fastest growing piece of our business now was new student recruitment, is current student retention, reaching out to freshmen and saying, how's it going so far? You just started school a week or two ago. How's it going? How's the food? Have you found a sense of belonging? Are you involved in any groups? Obviously that those are all boxes that when you check them, that student's going to continue to persist and get their degree. Hence the name CompleteU. So
I've got two questions to sort of build on the story that you just shared. First, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. I think certainly the pandemic has fundamentally shifted, or at least the us all sort of going through the pandemic has created some real shifts in how we work and in how we communicate with one another. I mean, pre-pandemic, I don't know that you and I would be on a podcast talking to one another. We'd probably be in a bar somewhere having a beer, right?
Yeah.
That not that we can't do that anymore, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What kinds of changes have you seen or shifts have you seen with the adult learner coming out of the pandemic, or at least the heart of the pandemic, that have sort of stuck with us?
Yeah, really good question. So this is nothing new. Adult learners is obviously nothing new. That's the reason that the Southern New Hampshires of the world and Maryland Global Campus and University of Phoenix, go down the line, Western Governor, all those big institutions are around, right? Excuse me. So it's the reason that they're around. What we're seeing now is everybody else realizing, oh, this is a growing market. It's beyond even those big schools. And SNHU, I always point to them. People forget SNHU was a small private school in New Hampshire, no different than the ones I just rattled off. Virginia Wesleyan, Point Park, Cambridge College, right? Tiffin University in Ohio. So I could go down the line, but they understood 15 years ahead, Paul LeBlanc and his team, that this is the way things are going, but there still is enough of a market there. So again, the pandemic just highlighted this for all of us, right? Think of our everyday lives. I can tell you, I used to have to get on an airplane to go see clients just to get in front of them and get their attention. The moment the pandemic hit, and I noticed this with CompleteU, we had a client in Ohio. I said, hey, I'll come over. Let's get coffee. It's an hour and a half away. And they said, you know what, John, I appreciate that, but by the time you drive over here, we say it's going to be a half-hour meeting, it ends up being an hour meeting, or even if we are on time, like it just is extra time built in. Do you mind if we just do a Zoom? No. As a business owner, I'm going, okay, I would like to see you in person. We just still go see our clients, right? And I just saw them the other day, but it has been great because adult learners are the same as the rest of us, meaning my time is of the essence, and we're realizing that the Zoom and like you can really get things done in a short amount of time and have access that you never had before, right? And it goes back to price. I'll give you another little example, Dave. I had a client. It was a large client, Power 5 school, I'll call them when you're talking the athletic side of the world. And they really wanted to scale their online about 5 years ago. And I said, are you going to charge the same amount of money? And they said, yes, look at our brand. Look, yes, absolutely. And I just thought, man, that's going to be tough, and now there's so much competition for online learning that there's still a window. I've shared this with a couple of our clients that aren't yet fully in the online space. There is a window over the next 5 to 7 years that you can scale certain degrees online for the right price with the right brand. And you will win. An online undergrad business degree, right? Online psychology degree undergrad, right? So you go through it, and you will win if you have the right brand. Because I know we're going to talk about, but like where I'm really bullish now, in another area we're getting into as a company, is the workforce development space. And there's no way that we can have all these labor shortages in nursing and teaching and cybersecurity, and the schools have enrollment crunches. Somewhere, somebody's going to figure out those two things.
There's a disconnect, right? But I think about it too, John. I mean, I'm pushing 50, so I still consider myself to be a learner, and most days I am an adult. And I think about my own learning path. And when I was 27 to 31, I went back full time to the University of Pittsburgh. I did a JD MBA, and 3.5 years of my life, right? And the earnings that I gave up, the money that I spent, and frankly, the time, right? In retrospect, like I wouldn't trade the degrees and the experience, but I think I could have solved for it far more efficiently in today's world, right? And I look at some of the things that are available now that I've been able to take advantage of. I've been able to get certified at around things like experiential learning and design thinking. From a fairly prestigious university for a couple of windows of time and in a summer versus 2.5 or 3 years, right? And then I also look at things like certifications that are available that are specific to what I do in areas like marketing and sales. And I've been able to utilize certification programs that are commercially available to really gain knowledge and credibility around what it is that I do on an everyday basis, right? And I think schools are starting to tap into that thinking in different ways.
So cybersecurity is a great example of what you're talking about. Are there cybersecurity certificate programs out there? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are short 700,000 positions in cybersecurity right now, which is scary when you think about it, because you're talking major non-traditional militaristic threats that are coming in every single day to our country, right? You're talking about just even, cyber attacks on colleges and universities and their ability to stop that, right? That's just another example, given that we're talking about higher ed. I will say that what we really need, in talking to some experts, the University of Pittsburgh has a cybersecurity program, and talk to those folks there, and they said, yes, we need those everyday positions that certificates require. What we really need are really talented people, though, to start coming into cybersecurity. That you have software engineers that are coming into cybersecurity that know it inside and out. That is what we need. We need both. But when I hear, well, let's go scale this cybersecurity boot camp, I'm not saying it's not needed. What we really need, though, is really talented people, right? That not that those people aren't talented that do boot camps. I'm saying like that next level of knowledge that requires more schooling, that requires a deeper degree, and more education. And I would say the same for any graduate school programs, right? Do you and I want our electrical or structural engineers to have a certificate? Probably not, right?
Right.
Right. Do we want our brain surgeons to have a certificate? Probably not, right? So, everything is needed, and we do need these things. I think what schools more than ever, which is great, are realizing, how do we complete this triangle of there's a labor shortage, we provide schooling, and if we provide it for the right price, we can have this great synergy of let's provide programs that we know our students can graduate and get jobs in, right? That does not mean there's not a need for the humanities, by the way. I just think there's not a need for the humanities at every single school, right? You don't need 10 schools in an area with the humanities, right? And I think that's what higher ed is starting to understand. As enrollments come down, schools are starting to realize, what is our brand, what is our core mission with which programs,
right? So we're really talking about academic programming and being far more strategic around what it is that you offer and to whom, and doing it in such a way where there's a natural pathway to employment, right?
That's right.
So how do you see schools doing that effectively today? Meaning, how are some of the schools that you work with applying real strategic thinking to solving that equation or that triangulation as you described it?
Yeah. So I get that question a lot. So the first step is finding the private industry partner. You hear all the time about these private-public partnerships. Even though it might be a private industry with a private school, we still call them private-public partnerships. So one example is health systems. We've been asked to work with a health system because they said we need to scale. We have a massive nursing shortage across this country. I mean, I think there's 275,000 nursing positions needed over the next, 10, 15 years. I mean, that's a big number, right? So when you're a school looking for students, this is a good place to find them. So we're going to help introduce them to university partners that will upskill the health system's employees from an LPN into a bachelor's of nursing, right? And get them into that BSN program, and the health system's willing to pay for it. That's step one. And as a reciprocal, then the schools can say, hey, all of our nursing graduates, here's a partner of ours at this health system, would you like to go work there, right? So it becomes a great circle that way and two-way street. The same goes for teachers. So we're seeing something like, I don't know, like 55,000, I think on the low end, 55,000 teachers. It seems like a small number, but paraprofessionals are needed. I just talked to somebody in the Pittsburgh area that runs a larger institution that's not quite a school district, but they said we need 40 paraprofessionals today. Wow. 40. And so what we're doing, we partnered with a company called Bloomboard here in Pittsburgh, and they are solving the teacher shortage problem by providing curriculum and the LMS, so the learning management system, the outreach, so the mechanism electronically and the curriculum, and then we're helping them partner with higher ed institutions so that their faculty can deliver that curriculum so that paraprofessionals at these districts can, on the job in the middle of the day, set aside an hour and a half. The district will pay for them to go back and get their education degree. And so they will make more money and they don't have to pay for it. Those are the kind of partnerships, Dave, over time will scale faster. That is where higher education, I think, in some ways, that doesn't mean you're not going to need a small private liberal arts school, because there is that needed. But you're going to see those kind of things scale faster. And so we're trying to help those schools connect the dots of, all right, great, who's going to reach out to the 12,000 paraprofessionals in ABC area of Florida, right? Well, the district doesn't have that scale. So that's where CompleteU comes in and says, here, we'll introduce them to Bloomboard. And we're excited about that partner. So doing our partnerships with College App to find adult learners with a high intent to enroll and Bloomberg to solve the teacher shortage problem. We're really excited about where our growth is, and more importantly, the success stories that come from the students that we're helping, and the adult learners that are winning.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, if we think about it sort of holistically, John, what we're talking about is what's the offering, right? Through academic programs. How are we going to deliver that offering through sales and marketing, right? To engage and entice prospective learners. And then how are we going to create an environment and the right engagement to help those learners through the journey that includes a path to employment, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where, going back to, there's no way we can have all these labor shortages and enrollment shortages, right? And what does that mean? And the trades are a great example. I mean, the trades are growing now. We still have a shortage in the trades, but I think this idea of, I only think of higher education as a 4-year degree on a pristine private school or Research One land-grant institution campus. Like, that is like, if you think, well, what does that look like? And now people are going, you know what? I wonder if I could get a certificate in HVAC or mechanical, diesel mechanic. Can I get that? And there's a partnership going on right now between a trucking company and American Diesel, which is a company based out of Columbus. And that's what they're doing. And they provide a great degree that the student doesn't pay for, the trucking company pays for, and it's $9,000. And the only reason they'd ever have to pay that back is if they don't go to work for that company. And that is what those partnerships should look like, right? And these companies have such a labor shortage they're going to spend money to go find employees anyways. Why wouldn't we just go train them the way we want to train them and then ask them to stick around?
It makes a lot of sense. Well, hey, so as we think about this really interesting conversation, what are some insights or some actionable ideas that you would want some of our listeners to really leave with?
I think it's just the idea that if you're an adult out there and you're going, I have some college, no degree, I didn't finish, just know there's a path for you to do it quickly and affordably now. There's the right higher ed partner out there. Just do your homework and find one that's going to be flexible for you. One of our partners in Ohio right now is looking at prior learning assessment and saying, hey, John Meyer was a biology major, but has been in banking for the last 12 years. And we think that they have enough experience that if they come back and finish this 1 year of schooling, they can get a degree in finance from our institution, right? And that might really mean something to them, which is great. And they may do that. I think that kind of flexibility is what you're going to see, like schools getting more flexible in prior learning assessment and those kind of things. And going back to, it could be diesel mechanic school, it could be an HVAC, it could be plumbing, it could be cybersecurity, it could be nursing, whatever it is. The great thing is the market has absolutely come back to, I don't want to sound too clear, the people. It has come back to the student. This idea, now schools are competing and they're discounting, and the market has come back to these families. If you do your homework, then there is the right school, the right program, the right price with the right ROI. That being the key, that you can go, you know what? I don't have to mortgage my future on top of my mortgage just to go back to school.
Mm-hmm. And as I sit here and sort of process the conversation we've just had, to me, it seems like the thread line that I hear loud and clear with CompleteU success is that you haven't lost sight of the student. And you're constantly looking to solve new problems and uncover opportunities for the schools that are partners to your company.
I think every organization, whether it was higher education or any other enterprise, is guilty of, when times are really good, you focus on the growth. So some of the details get lost. Mm-hmm. And what I realized was, and I'm painting with a broad brush, and why I started CompleteU is, as enrollments were really flush, if you had 1,000 students that were carrying cash balances, well, we'll just go find another 1,000 students. Mm-hmm. And now that's not the case. And it's a good problem because now you're forced to focus on student retention and who are the right type of students we should be recruiting, right? Instead of it just being a numbers game into a funnel, let's look at who is the student that we want to bring in that we think will be successful, that will get a great degree with a great ROI, will help our 6-year grad rate, will be a great steward of the institution. Everyone wins in that synergy. When students lose and schools lose is when you just start recruiting into numbers, when you don't have high touch, high engagement processes, when you're not focused on retention, when you're just worried about numbers and students at a number, that's when schools get lost. That's when you see grad rates slip. That's when you see students complain because they can feel it. We're all human. And these students, whether they're 18 years old or whether they're 38 years old or 58 years old, people aren't dumb. They can see through it. And when you treat them like a number, they can see through it. And I think when you focus on that high touch, high engagement, no matter what it is, whether they use us or just do their own process, you're going to win. And so that's the whole point.
I think that's great advice, right? And in the age of data and analytics and generative AI, as valuable as those things can be, in the end, it does come down to people, and people feel like they matter.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at like a Unity Environmental University, they're probably going to have 10,000 students here in the next couple of years. They had 700 students 7-8 years ago, and they were a traditional on-campus school. And they have pivoted because they have tripled down on their brand. Hence, they went from Unity College to Unity Environmental University. And Melik, their president there, has done a phenomenal job of leading that charge of growing at the right pace and saying, with everything going on, is there a market for online environmental studies? And what overwhelmingly the answer is yes. So what are the other programs that schools should be tripling down on their brand and giving access and giving flexibility to students? And when you do that, you're going to grow quickly. That's what the world wants right now.
Well, I think that's a great last word. John, fantastic to have you on the podcast. Always good to talk to you. I hope we can do it again because I always leave with something to think about. And I hope that our listeners here will feel the same.
I really appreciate you having me on. And, Dave, your work in higher ed speaks for itself. You really have seen every separate side of it that you can think of. And thanks for having me on and letting us tell our story.
Absolutely. We'll be sure to do it again. And for those of you that are not familiar with John and his company, CompleteU, they are certainly on the web. If you're in higher education today, I would encourage you to seek him out and to talk to him about how he might be able to uniquely solve some of the challenges that you have at your institution. So, John, thanks for joining us. We'll do it again sometime soon.
Thanks, Dave.